Hello and welcome. Here, I'd like to introduce you to Samuel. Samuel is the owner of the restaurant. Uh, he opened his restaurant called Paul Germain. He created it in 2008. He's considered a fashionista in Brest. He also took part of a show called La Reine du Shopping, the Queen of Shopping. So when people see him, they identify him with that as well. His husband, Paul, is an interior designer, and the two of them create an absolutely fantastic atmosphere in their restaurant. Sam has decided that he wanted to share the rougail de saucisse fumée recipe. The reason for that is because it's a great mixture of ingredients that are very local and traditional and ingredients that come from different parts of the world. Brest is a big city. It is on the coast, on the French coast. It's so here you have France on this side. This is England, and this is the English Channel. Um, it's Brest is situated at the very tip of the hump that goes out into the sea in France. Um, it is about 5.5 hour drive from Paris, 15 minutes by flight, 3 hours by the TGV, which is the fast train. And you have flights and trains all day long, flights almost every hour. It is in the Rad here, and you can see it's completely surrounded by water and protected because to get into this area, you have to go through this little channel. You have the nuclear submarine base that's situated over here. Brest is here, and you have this little river called La Pinfeld that you have to cross to get into the city. So this is where the bridges are to get into um, the city center, the first old city center, because now today this is also considered the city center. But before, Brest was completely surrounded by walls, and it had a chateau right here. And people that wanted to go to the city center of Brest, they had to cross the bridge and pay a tax. I will show you the Tour Tanguy here, where you had to pay the tax before you're going in. Sam's restaurant is right here. So it's in the old part of the city center, and it's right in front of a very famous plaza called La Place des Petits Chevaux, where you have kind of a merry-go-round statue with horses on it. So it's emblematic. Brest is a very ugly city, but the outskirts are absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. So I chose to show you a few pictures. This is the old wall that surrounded Brest. This is where you had to cross the Pinfeld to get to Brest. This part was part of the military port. It's called Les Plateaux du Capucin. So they used to build the ships here. If you saw Les Misérables, that's where they built the ships. Um, and the army gave this back to the city just about 5 years ago. And in there, it's become a cultural center. Inside, you have the Canot de l'Empereur, which is the new, it was his boat, and it's the new display. They just displayed that. This is the Tour Tanguy that I spoke about. And so you would go to the Tour Tanguy, pay your tax, buff, cross the bridge, and you'd be on the city center here. Here you see the military boats. This was taken from my office, and you see the sea, you see the a nuclear submarine coming in. She's coming in right now. You also see that it's pretty hazy there. So the weather in Brest is quite rainy. We call Brest le peau de chambre de la France, which is not a very sexy way of saying that it's a rainy area. Here, this is a little bit north, so it's on this side of the bridge, and it's a beach called Trigana. And so it's on the north side. And here I chose to show you this because this is we have a lot of American monuments in Brest. The reason for that is because Brest was, because it's a military port, it was saved by the American soldiers twice. First in the First World War, where it served as the landing of 800,000 American soldiers. That's how they uh, came to France to save them. And then it was also during the Second World War, Brest was taken hostage by the Germans. And so all the inhabitants had to leave the city and the area. The only people who were allowed to stay in Brest were the politicians, a few doctors, notaries, um, and everybody else had left. The military also stayed. Um, it was a very dire situation, and the Americans came and bombarded the city completely, and that drove the Germans away. And thanks to that, the inhabitants were able to then come back to their city. This is why it's also a very ugly city. They had to rebuild it very, very quickly after the war and the bombardments because um, people were coming back and they had nowhere to stay. Everything was gone. So there we go. We have to do the recipe with Sam. We have a few ingredients. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We need to learn them in French as well, so that when he speaks to us, he does not speak English. So when he's going to be speaking with us, he will be using these words. So this is a beefsteak tomato, and in French, you call that a cœur de bœuf. Tomate de cœur de bœuf. Here you have smoked sausages, and in French, you're going to call them saucisses fumées. Here you have onions. In French, it's oignon. Just pinch your nose and it will come naturally. Here you have ginger, which is gingembre. Here you can see the West Indian peppers, and in French, you're going to call them piment antillais. Piment antillais. They're very spicy. Ugh. And it doesn't matter what color you get, they're all the same. They're just pretty. Olive oil, huile d'olive, basmati rice, riz basmati, kumbhava, kumbhava. All right, a little bit of history as far as the ingredients come. I did tell you that some of the ingredients came from the region. So one of the famous ingredients is the onion. So here in the northern part of Brest, you have a city called Roscoff, really known for its spas, by the way. So you go from Brest, you go to Roscoff. Roscoff is a lot of land. They grow artichokes and onions and cauliflower. But the onions are very, very famous. So they would harvest the onions and braid them. And every summer, the Johnnies, we call them Johnnies, would take the onions, take them to England and sell them and bring the money back to France. These farmers were very, very rich because people really, really like these onions. So just to compare, the French, these onions are a little pink and they're much smaller than the yellow onions that we're used to using here. Here, I mean America. Then you have the saucisse de Molène, which is a smoked sausage. So if you look, this is Brest. Brest is here. Up, 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 up. You go here on the coast, and it's always north. And you have l'archipel de Molène, which is a tiny, tiny island with lots of little islands around it. It is seal heaven if you want to go and watch the seals. It's very small. You can walk around the entire island easily in half a day. Um, it's also in a strategic area. You see, it's an area that most boats, merchant boats, have to go through to pass the English Channel. And it's a very difficult place to pass. So this island became very, very rich because of all the boats that um, fell hostage because of the currents. So this is where Moulin is. So Moulin also harvests seaweed. Here it is called rack. You would have to be a specialist to know that word, I'm sure. The rack seaweed is very, very, very tall. The tides in Brest are very big. They're very important. So it's easy to harvest when the tide is low. And they would harvest it and put it on their fields because it's a good nutrient for the fields. Fertilizer is the word I'm looking for. And they would also compact it very tightly and make bricks out of it. So in the winter, if they didn't have enough firewood, they would use that as firewood, very, very tight. So here you have a man, and he created a little ditch here, and he's uh, fire. He made a fire with his guillemot, and see how it's very smoky because it's so humid straight from the sea, and the smoke is actually being used to smoke the sausage. So this sausage is very specific to the area and impossible to mimic or get here. Then we have the basmati rice, which does not come from France. Obviously, it comes from the Himalaya. Here you have a little bit of the history. You can follow the link and see if you can. They have an English version, so you can go to the English version of it. Um, Basmati rice was India. India, yeah, is close to Mauritius Island and the island Reunion, and I think that's how it came to Europe with that. Then you have the story of the pimentier. So I found out that it actually comes from the Aztecs, which really surprised me. From the French side, we would probably say that it's from India and these islands, the Reunion and Mauritius Islands. They put them in every dish they cook. And then the story of the kombava. Kombava, I have no idea what that is. I've never used it, never cooked with it, so I'm looking forward to discovering that with you. Ginger. Ginger is a spice in France and most of Europe that is still considered more of a um, something to help you feel better, give you energy, or if you're sick, you can use it. So they infuse it in water. It's not something that we use that much in culinary. So that's also a very unusual initiative that he took to use that. Olive oil comes from North Africa, and it trickled its way up to Brittany. Now, this is definitely not something that most people use in Brittany. Brittany is known for its salted butter. They cook everything with salted butter, and they don't eat butter without salt. The butter without salt is from the Normandy region, and there's a butter war going between these two state-like things. You must be from Normandy if you don't use buttered with salt. So, so Sam also really likes to um, buy his ingredients locally. He finds that it's much fresher and of better quality, and he also thinks likes what it does to the environment and to the community. Um, if you go to Brest, you will know that the marché, the outdoor markets, are very different from what we may know here. So the farmers will pick their fruits and vegetables in the morning. They'll go straight to the market and sell it to you. And when they don't have anything left, poof, they go back and they do that again the next day. Another thing that we have to keep in consideration is the change in measures and temperatures. So I put a couple links here that can help you um, convert temperatures measurements here. All right, now this is the vocabulary that we need to practice because that's what he's going to be using when we're going to be cooking with him. So each number is listed here. You know them in English. I will say them in French so you can hear it in French. Louche, mug, faitout, louche, râpe, verre, moule à gâteau, bol, cuillère à thé, couteau, cuillère à soupe, fourchette, coutellerie, poêle à frire, tasse à mesurer, pichet, bol, poivrière et salière, un fouet, planche à découper, rouleau à pâtisserie. He will probably use these little words here and we will practice them together when we meet. He's going to probably say un petit bout de, which is not a measuring tool, but he will say it is. Petit, grand, pincé. So petit is small, grand is big, pincé is a pinch. I'm sorry, let's go back to un petit bout. Un petit bout is a little piece of. Remuer means to mix. Faire revenir is when you start frying up the something, whatever it is. Mesurer is to measure. Bouillir is to boil. Couper en rondelles is to slice. Trancher is to cut. Verser is to pour. Couper en petits morceaux is to cut in small pieces. Other words that we will need to know. Chaud is hot. Doucement, slowly. 100 grams, 100 grams. 100 grams is 100 grammes, 100 grams. 150 degrés, 150 degrees. Une cuillère à café is a teaspoon. Une cuillère à soupe is a tablespoon. 5 centimeters is 5 centimeters. The numbers are going to be necessary as well. I will say them in French slowly. You don't have to memorize them. I will help you during the cooking lesson. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 200, 300, 400. Ensuite, quelques mots à connaître pour se présenter et pour poser des questions. Donc, hello, c'est bonjour. I did not understand. Je n'ai pas compris. How are you? Comment allez-vous? How much did you say? Moi, j'ai dit 7 ans. Combien avez-vous dit? I love this. J'aime ça. This is cool. C'est trop cool. How did you do this again? Comment avez-vous fait? My name is. Je m'appelle. Oh zut, excusez-moi. Could you repeat? Pourriez-vous répéter? Excuse me. Excuse me, c'est pardon. I don't see it here. Pardon. Voilà, donc j'ai hâte de vous voir. Surtout, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à m'envoyer un mail ici. Si vous voulez plus de renseignements sur cette petite séance, vous pouvez aller sur le site internet. Voilà, à très vite. Merci.